joining us on Zoom, slowly finding their way to us virtually. Welcome again. It's good that you're here. Most of you have been here for the moment that we've just had. For those catching up at home, we were of course due to have a smoking ceremony, and Stacey, Nico Piper, local elder and wonderful woman, is not able to join us through COVID, so we've been very flexible and adaptive, and all those wonderful COVID-taught things that we now have in our little kit bag that we've got all the more. So we were very nimble this morning, and I'm grateful for those who've done their thing and adapted around us. But for this particular moment, again, would like to acknowledge country. And it's been really helpful for me, as someone who's not a First Nations people, to know that this isn't just, it's wonderful in the amount of places this happens now, acknowledgements of country. But it's been really helpful to have Glenn and other elders just remind us of why we do this, that it's not just a token nod to a group or just go, oh, hang on, we need to also acknowledge. It captures, it's what First Nations people did. We're actually helping do what has always been done on this land. When different tribes, when different peoples would meet and gather and move on to other land. So it's not just a nod to a group, it's actually engaging in a cultural practice that wanted to set up safety. So I would like to acknowledge country, not as a token gesture, but to pay my respects to the elders of this place that stretch back, or it could be up to 60, 65,000 years, the elders past and also present and also emerging, all of whom weave that story together. They have a connection to country and land and skyways and water that precedes mine, and I wish to honour and pay respects for the wisdom that they hold to us and will continue to hold to us. You walked through this door here, and under it, or over it, you were under it, over it was a word that was Wominjeka. We've all heard and seen it gratefully. It's a great little way to again nod to our First Nations peoples, a word which means welcome, or which I thought and felt always meant welcome. But I'm enjoying the education offered me, particularly by Mandy Nicholson, who's a Wurundjeri Woolum woman of this local kind of hood, and offered this wonderful, simple teaching that Wominjeka is not our Aussie g'day, it's not hello, it's not how you going kind of stuff. Because whilst we hear it as welcome, when broken down, Warum means welcome, but the next part, G, means to this place with purpose, to hear with purpose and intent. And then Warum, I've just mucked the word, I'm going Wurundjeri. Wominjeka, and the final word means, I've even forgotten it. What was it? It means welcome, it means come with purpose, with intent to this place. But of course for her, when she explains it, she says it doesn't just mean you are welcome, it invites a culturally safe place. It actually extends an invitation that if received, if you take up the offering of Wominjeka and come with purpose and intent, we together create a culturally safe place. And so, Wominjeka, come here with purpose, with intent, to listen, to understand, to see what you have not seen, to hear what you have not yet heard about what it means to walk together as first and second peoples. Wominjeka. We're going to welcome a special guest in just a sec, who's hiding away, gone into the second row, just with the humility of the man. Amazing. So I'm glad you're still here. I had a little moment ago. I don't think he's done a runner. Glenn was with us this morning in our early service, and what we did is very similar to what we're going to do today. We all wrote questions down and then just pulled them out of the hat and grilled him with it. So I was a little bit worried he's got a bit gun shy and thought round 2 might be a little bit worse than round 1. So Glenn Loughrey, I'm going to welcome you up. Is that what I'm doing first? I think so. I should also acknowledge too, I'm here not because I was going to be here, but Steve the moderator is also battling with the beast that is COVID. So again, my presence here is another adaptive pivot moment. But I'm going to welcome Glenn Loughrey, who is a Wurundjeri man So he's, from those parts over there is his mob and tribe. He'll speak to that in a sec. He's also an Anglican priest out in the Glen Iris way. He was the first canon of the St Paul's Cathedral, so a really significant thing. But he's so many things. He's this wonderful author, wonderful artist. You can see his bits and bobs online in all sorts of places. He's kind of an academic within the kind of Christian contemplative scene. Thomas Merton, people may or may not be familiar with Thomas Merton. That's kind of his dabbling place. But he's also a husband. He's also a father. He's also a pet owner. He also wears hats inside. He's all these crazy things. And he comes here, yes, which makes Libby culturally safe as well. Dogs and hats, yes, Libby's on board, which is fantastic. But please read up on Glenn and all the wonderful things he's offered. And it's important to know too, because we're going to have a Q&A experience with Glenn as well. So the more, parts and strings of his bow that you're familiar with might just give you some access points to hear from him of what you'd like to know, what you need to know to better walk together as first and second people. So if you could, a warm round of applause for Glenn Loughrey.
Thank you, Matt, but it's important to remember that I'm just an ordinary bloke, and of ordinary blokes I'm the most ordinary. There's nothing special about me, really. Darablabinya Badu, Wiradjuri Awanadi, Glen Loughrey, Yaradu Marang, Goambana. I'm Wiradjuri, that's my language, so I said I'm proud to be Wiradjuri. My name is Glen Loughrey. Yaradu Marang means good day, and Goambana means welcome. So welcome to this afternoon, and as we've done all day, we do recognise where we stand and whose land we're on. We're privileged to be here, and I hope today we don't mess it up too much as we walk in and out and around about, but we are comfortable in this damp weather on this particular special and sacred space. My task this afternoon is undefined, which is always good fun. My task this afternoon is to try and answer a question that was put to me by an 11-year-old from Greenborough during National Reconciliation Week. This young man sat up in the stalls and said, "How was it possible for one group of people to think other people weren't human and they could kill them and exterminate them?" That was an 11-year-old. And that's the question we're battling with all the way through the history of this country and through the history of the last 500 plus years, when colonialism or coloniality became the dominant way of acting in relationship to others. When we decided that there was a universal language, that there was a universal economic system, and there was a universal or one faith system, and that out of Western Europe, a small part of Western Europe, we decided that we were going to implant that upon all others so that we could increase our wealth and our power and our control. And that brought about, and all that was driven by, once it was put into a form, was driven by the idea of race and racism. And it came out of a thinking that said that there was an idea of pure blood, that we can thank the 16th century Spanish horse breeders for that one. And that's true, that's where it came from. And it resulted in the destitution in Spain of Jewish people and of the Moors. It was then transferred into South America, and in South America it became part of that papal bull of about 1660 or there, 1664 I think, which said that if people don't believe like you, don't have a faith in a God like you, then they're not real people. That was a really difficult, that came after the one that we know a lot about in this country, terra nullius, water nullius, people nullius. So it talked about the idea that you could go into somebody's country, and if they didn't have the same faith system as you and they didn't become a part of your faith system, you could take everything away from them, including their lives. And that's what happened in South America. It happened in Africa. It is what I call not only I, but scholars such as Walter Mingolo call the undeveloping of nations. By going into Africa and taking the leaders and the knowledge holders away and making them slaves and sending them off to America because you'd got rid of the local workforce because they weren't too happy about getting involved with you, you actually undevelop that country. You take away the knowledge system, you take away the hierarchy, you take away the successional system, the traditions and the languages, and you take them out, and then you replace it with your system. And you replace it with the Western European system that takes over how you think. It is why in those countries that decolonisation doesn't always work, because when you put the local people back in charge, you're only changing people, not the way the system works, because the system has been decimated centuries before. So you end up just having local people in charge of a Western governmental, economic, legal system, which leaves them open to the same kinds of imperfect natures as there was there before they got in power. And this whole process of slavery and racism underlines colonialism and underlines democracy, whether we like to accept it or not. It's one of those uncomfortable truths. It sits there at the basis of all of that. Australia, contrary to our previous Prime Minister, was built on slavery because the money needed to power the English Industrial Revolution and to build the ships that came out here came from where? Slave plantations, of which many people had an interest in. They funded the process out here so that we could develop an economy here that fed back into that system. So slavery was an important part of that. And the idea of race, pure blood, then it went to pure belief, and then it went to pure nation, nationalism. Those things that define us became built out of that whole idea of race. One of the things that happened here, and Auntie Joy wrote that book, wonderful knowledge, wonderful elder. One of the things that the people who came to Australia did was, thinking out of a patriarchal mind, decimated the male population of Aboriginal people. What they didn't know, or failed to know, was that much of the knowledge systems in our country are equally and appropriately held by women. And we have the women to thank for what knowledge systems we have today in many ways. In many ways we have been able to hold together through people like Auntie Joy, Auntie Kim, Auntie Betty, and a whole lot of others who have provided that knowledge system in, and that's really important to remember. So in some senses and in places in the north of Australia, we haven't been as undeveloped as we have been here in the east and the south of Australia. As I said this morning, 100% of the people, the local Aboriginal people in the area I come from, were exterminated by 1876, in 50 years. So when I went back a few months ago, they were having a celebration in the centre of the town, and it had a big sign that says 200 years of celebrating 200 years of European settlement. I guess you know I felt really excited about that. And I spoke to some of the elders, and some of the elders said, "Oh, you're back here for Settlers Week, are you?" I said, "No, mate, not, eh? What are they doing?" He said, "You know, they asked us to do a welcome to country." asked us to do a welcome of country. I said, well, how did that go? Oh, we politely said no. I wasn't sure about the word politely. Maybe that was an overstatement of what was actually said, but they did say no, and they didn't go. And on the bottom of this big sign, it says, we acknowledge the Loughrey people. Well, there's none left. I mean, I'm not local. My mob, while I'm a Wiradjuri, I'm not a local person. My great-grandfather came from 20 or 30 miles further out. So, you know, this undeveloping of our country has led to where we are today, and where we actually think Aboriginal people are deficit people and we are destituted, we don't have a voice, our knowledge systems aren't recognised unless they have a useful economic use. They're productive, you know. Help us to stop burning down our houses, which are built in all the wrong places. And, you know, help us to deal with the flow of the water, because we build the houses in all the wrong places. Help us to deal with things that, you know, gives us new foods to have happen so we can make money out of our restaurants. You know, we don't actually want to hear Aboriginal voices speak about what matters to them. Speak about the issues to do with why we are still the largest cohort of people who are taken away from families, incarcerated, have poor health. Nobody wants to deal with those things other than through a very Western lens, which is we throw money at it and we send non-Indigenous NGOs out to deal with it. And when actually the reason why we're in this place is because people have been so destituted away from their own particular systems which gave them health. You know, Aboriginal people lived off the land. We ate stuff off the land. We caught stuff off the land. We did agriculture. Murnong. It was right across this place, right across the Victoria. It was the first agricultural system. Women did it. They were the first agriculturalists. Brought a mob of sheep in and boom, it's all gone. You know, we've got a gallery called Murnong, and we are hoping to do something about, in our little space, putting a bit of it back. But that's been taken out. We've devastated it with our practices. We don't understand that Aboriginal people used to eat out of the ground, but they also used to eat the animals to get the things out of the ground that they couldn't eat directly, because it would make them crook. It was an interlocking system of survival for everybody, including the animals. If that particular animal is necessary to you for a particular mineral or vitamin or antibiotic, you make sure there's plenty of them around. You look after them, because that's a mutual, that's that whole idea of custodial ethic. Custodial ethic is about the 3 R's: respect, responsibility, and reciprocity. It's connected into the kinship network, not just amongst human beings, so I know which person in this room is responsible for my funeral, because that's what happens. It's not necessarily my wife, it'll be somebody else. Or responsible for my education, or responsible for my support. There'll be people in my network that does that. But I'm also responsible to the trees, because they work very hard at that as well. They give me oxygen. They provide me with signs where the water is. They give me a place to get nuts and fruit to eat. And their leaves allow me to get it. I don't have to carry a metal water bottle around. I can just take a tree leaf and have a chew. Take a bit of a flower and get some honey. I have to look after them. I have to show them the respect, act responsibly, and then reciprocally, they will look after me. That's the whole custodial ethic thing. For those from the Christian tradition, it sounds a bit like love your neighbour as yourself, don't you think? It kind of fits into that idea. We are indelibly connected to one another, and we carry all of that with us at all times. We're born out of the ground under a tree, and we die under a tree into the ground. We bring with us out of the ground everything that's been laid down there before us. Centuries of knowledge, wisdom, law, ritual, ceremony comes up. You know, when we used to get babies in the old times, we used to lay them on the ground so they could upload the latest software. It's that idea that we're so indelibly connected to everything around us that it speaks into who we are. And we live between those two trees to make sure we don't put anything back down there that's bad, resolve some of the things that are in it, and to honour fully what is there. It's a powerful way of living. You do not have time to be a university professor if you're doing that. And that's the point, really. For our cultures, that was it. You've heard me say, my father would say, when I was a kid, we used to have sheep, 2,500 acres. And we never had a car or a tractor or anything. We walked everywhere, walked across it. And he never had burrs, he never had noxious weeds, because he would also carry a hoe over his shoulder and his water bottle in his hand, and he'd make sure nothing was there that shouldn't be there. And when we were told to go and bring a mob of sheep from up the back of the paddock down through the gate, where he would be standing, smoking his umpteenth cigarette for the day, rolling 5 more behind each ear, we'd bring the sheep down with a dog, and he counted them through the gate. He'd go, "You got something else to do, son, have you?" And you go, "No, Dad, I haven't got anything else to do." He said, "Yeah, I think you do." "Why?" "You made dust. You moved them too fast. You made dust. And if you make dust, you'll miss something important. You'll miss something important." Which brings us to this whole process of reconciliation. We've become very, very focused on getting reconciliation in this country, of having a nice relationship with Aboriginal people. You know, somebody asked me to do something for them a few weeks ago, and I said, "Yeah, I'll do it, but this is what I'll do." And they said, no, we don't want that. We want to have a nice relationship with the people who used to pray on this land before we came here. And I went, that's a bit hard. They're dead. And your lot killed them. I said, "I'm not interested in relationship, I just want your money." And everybody says, "Oh, that's typical, you blackfellas only want money." I said, "Mate, if somebody comes into your house, steals all your precious goods, takes your wife, sends your children off to a private school in Melbourne, do you come home and go to the policeman, 'When you find that bloke, can you bring him around here and we'll have a cup of tea and a scone and I'll get to know him better?' No, you don't. You want him to be caught and locked up. And you want recompense for the things that were taken. So, relationship, me. Reparation, yes. And how do we do that? We have to not go into this idea that reconciliation is about nation building, which is what reconciliation in its modern sense is. I grew up in probably the first period of assimilation, where you had to be white. And skin colour made it possible to be white. Although my skin colour doesn't do any good for me at all. Another little kid, 11 years of old, said to me at the same event, "The fact that your mother was English and you have light-coloured skin, has that been a good thing?" You know why Jesus said, bring the children? And why people didn't want the children to come? Because they know when the emperor doesn't have any clothes on. Okay, they know when the emperor doesn't have any clothes on. They can see it. Okay, so the question was, is it better for you because your mother was English and you got light-coloured skin? And I go, no, not really. But then my brother's got my father's skin colour and he took off to England because he said it's too hard in Australia. You have to be 3 times as good as everybody else to be half as good. And for me, it's been a double-edged sword. It has allowed people um, if they don't think about it, to treat me as almost an equal. It has allowed me to do things like some university studies and get into places that I probably wouldn't have done if... I said to my mob at Glen Iris, if I'd have been darker skinned and looked like my father, would you have accepted me as a priest? And they said, oh, of course we would. And I said, yeah, but you know me now. When you first saw me, what would your response have been? And I suspect, and this is no criticism of them, it would have been much harder for me to do that position. So the skin colour is an important part of this, of this process. And it's not easy. It's not easy being white, to quote Kermit. And it's not easy being black. You're sort of somewhere in between all of this story. But the other thing is, people say the darndest things when they don't know who I am. And I really can get the idea that later on when they talk to somebody and go, oh, but I'm an anti-racist. I said, hey, mate, I was with you an hour ago. I know what you really say when no one's listening. Or you think no one's listening. Okay? So that's an important part of the process. It is getting back. So reconciliation has become, in this second stage since the 1990s and the Reconciliation Council, a process of assimilation. Every company, corporation, government, and I'm sorry, Joe, even councils, have put Aboriginal people in charge of the reconciliation process. For the same reason as that I I was asked to go for politics this year, and I said no because I'm a dual citizen. I'm a Wiradjuri, embedded at birth, Australian for the purposes of management and control. There's a conflict there. If I'm going to be true to my Aboriginality, I can't be in that place. And I don't get involved in help. I can give advice to people about their reconciliation action plans, what I call your be nice to blackfella plans. Reconciliation action plans. I'll give advice and I'll support people on those, but I won't get involved to lead them. Because Aboriginal people are not the ones that has to do the reconciling. Did we take your land? Have we ever taken your land? Have I come into your house, your backyard, and dug it up to take away a bucket full of coal? No. It wasn't us that did those things. So reconciliation is not about us as such. It is about, and it's not about having plans that include us, not about us having us on the boards. You know, I get lots of those asks, and you have to think about, are they actually genuinely wanting to hear what I have to say? And then you think, well, maybe they haven't heard me before, maybe. Or is this just black cladding? Oh, look, we've got a new canon of the cathedral, and he's Aboriginal. And I go, don't get too excited. You've been here for 147 years, and it's taken that long to find one you like. And anyway, I'm a canon of the cathedral as an artist who just happens to be Aboriginal. Okay, so they still really haven't got an Aboriginal canon yet, in a genuine sense. But, you know, we have to be careful how we do those things, okay? So the reconciliation is about non-Indigenous people reconciling, as I said this morning, and we'll go into that a little bit further, reconciling within themselves how we got to this place. In other words, how have non-Indigenous people got to their privileged position of entitlement on this land? And how did Aboriginal get to a destituted position on this land? And whose responsibility is it to fix that? How is that going to be resolved? It begins to be resolved by individuals, you, working through your family histories and how you got to your entitled position. You own a house, you've got a car, you might have a house on the coast to go for a holiday, you might take an overseas trip 2 times a year, you know. How did it get to there for you? and who lost on the way through on that process so that you could get to that place. This is not, as I said, about guilt. This is just about the uncomfortable truths of how societies in an economic democracy works, and how those with the power remain in the power and very rarely want to share it, very rarely want to give it away. So individually you have to spend the time to unpack the kind of thinking that allows you to remain in that place. You've got to unpack how you got to where you are. You've got to unpack what kind of thinking allows you that is underneath that process, then the kind of thinking that allows you to stay in that place. And then, what kind of thinking do we need to move into another place? And how difficult that is. I say to people who are selling their house, I go, well, when you sell your house, which Aboriginal group are you going to give the 25% to? I don't get much of an answer. But you've been on that land, your house has grown in value, you've benefited from that place. What are you going to do to repay the people whose land it was before you got there? How are you going to do that? Some people go, I don't know about 25%. Could do 10. No, I know, but the figures are irrelevant. It's not the figures that matter. It's the idea that in this there is a bit of how do we make reparation for our entitlement and privilege. That's the kind of reconciliation that we really need. And we need that done by the large corporations, Twiggy Forrest and others like them, which we all point to because they got too much for any of us, really. But it's not just them. It's everybody that is benefited out of this process. If this building here, if this congregation ceased to exist next week, what would the uniting church body do? Would they sell it? Would they redevelop it? Or would they give it back to the local people without any cost? Which is the process that would be reconciling to some degree? The last one. Which is the most difficult to do? The last one. But it is what we need to think about very seriously. Churches are losing, congregations and property are becoming redundant. Why aren't we sharing those redundant properties with people who could make really good use of them as a process of reparation? I've probably just said enough to get into trouble by every religious organisation in Melbourne. But they're the kind of things I want you to think about. How do we do that reconciliation? And the reconciliation begins with you. And there's a little booklet outside that's got a whole lot of 3 things that parishes should do is about engaging, educating, engaging, and remaining in the conversation for a long period of time. They're the 3 things you've got to do. You do them by unpacking these colonial attitudes within yourself and the institution. And there's a checklist there that you can go through and go, yep, oh bugger, yep, oh dash, when can I say no to any of these things? But don't think it's just you blokes, it's us as well. We get caught in this colonial process as well. We've been educated in a colonial system, we speak a colonial language, we're a part of the colonial economic system. So there's a double-edged sword for us. How do we manage our own coloniality? And we as Aboriginal people have to work through that process for ourselves. Okay? How much have we become a part of this? So reconciliation is that. It's you guys doing the hard work. We'll help you, We'll watch, we'll keep the fires burning, we'll be around, but you have to work through that process. Now, getting to the statement of the heart, which you've heard a lot about in the last few weeks, because the incoming government said that this is something they want to make happen. Voice, treaty, truth-telling, learning to walk with a limp. That's what Makarrata means. Doesn't mean holding hands and riding off into the sunset on 2 white horses and going, yippee, living happily ever after. It doesn't mean that. Statement of the heart, don't call it Uluru, gives it the whole wrong idea. Nothing happened at Uluru except it was signed. Okay? There's a bit of argy-bargy, but that's what happens when every family gets together. But it wasn't done at Uluru, it was signed there. But the statement from the heart came from 12 or 13 different groupings, 100+ people drawn together right across this country. They sat around the table and they thumped out what they wanted. And people in that group, it was truly democratic. Aboriginal governance is about consensus. So they had to agree. So it meant some people let go of things that were really, really, really important to them and their mob. And they had to go back and explain why they did that. Because people at home might not have been as happy as they could have been. So they did that in each of these groups. Then they brought all that together and did it again. Because those large group had to then agree. And so there was more stuff given up and more stuff hung on to and more stuff debated and changed. Truly democratic governance by the people. Powerful stuff. And just when you give it to the Prime Minister, he goes, nah, third chamber of the Parliament. Oh, get over yourself. It wasn't that. And it never was to be that. And there was a lot within that statement of the heart that it's an invitation to Australia, to you and to I, to get involved in a long journey of resolving unfinished business. We will not do it in a 3 years parliamentary sitting. Okay? The importance of voice to Constitution instead of voice to Parliament is when you put voice in the Constitution, you have some protections about how long it's going to be there. Because you'll need another referendum to get rid of it. So that gives us some security that what we're asking for remains. If you just take a voice to Parliament, it, like many other of these things, can disappear over time. Or be watered down like things like Mabo have been. Okay? And lose their potency. It must be in the Constitution. It must remind people that the Australian project of sovereignty is or needs, beside itself, the First Peoples project of sovereignty. They must come together and sit together and ride together. They cannot be one over the other. They must, if we're going to have a purely long-term democratic system, ride together. And our sovereignty is all about internal sovereignty. The federal sovereignty is about, to some extent, external sovereignty over what is outside and in all of their controls. We don't get into that. We want our sovereignty inside our places. So there's sovereignty and it can ride together. It's a dual sovereignty. So can we come back later? Yeah. Dual sovereignty that needs to work together. But if we put it in the Constitution, it means we have it locked away. And that's really important. And once you do that and you have a voice, as I said this morning, means if you have a voice, people can hear you and you exist. In some Aboriginal communities, what used to happen if somebody misbehaved and hurt somebody else, they would come into the centre of the circle like this. The mob would sit around the outside, and each of those people would be given a voice to tell what happened and what it feels like, why it happened and what it feels like. So everybody in there, those two people involved in that altercation, whatever it was, are actually having a voice about the situation. The people around all hear the voices. And once you've been able to have a voice, you're in a place to have a treaty. Because if you've heard everything, you find something that you agree with. You agree that, yeah, that's what happened. Yeah, well, actually, it was a little bit different, but that's pretty close. Whatever you want to do with it, we can, I'm obviously dumbing it down. And it comes to that, and that was where you have a treaty. We agree that we are going to resolve whatever is here. We agree that that's what happened and how we're going to look for it. Question time soon. Okay. I haven't even finished, Jonathan. Okay. So we have that process there. Then that's what treaty is called. I don't have to actually want to do everything with you to have a treaty. I just have to agree that we're going to work on things together in various places and various times. Once we've done that, we can do truth-telling. I'm not going to tell you the truth unless we have some kind of agreement. Because you can walk out. You can bash me on the nose. You can totally ignore me. But if we've had a voice and we've developed something that we agree on, then there is a starting point for us to tell truth-telling. And again, the truth-telling isn't about, in the wider scheme of things, about the bad things that happen to us, because we could go on forever. It's about that little boy I started with at the beginning's question. How did people get to think like this? That's the truth-telling thing. And then once we've done that, we have truth-telling. And we really tell what the consequences of that process was, what happened, and what we'd like to see happen, what we'd like to see change. And then after that we have makarata. And it's become a bit of a nice word. Getting on after a bad time. For Christians, you remember Jacob had a bit of a wrestle with God? Well, next morning he got up and he walked with a limp. That's the idea of makarata. In the community, it would mean that one person would have the right to inflict punishment on the other person, and it may be a spear in the thigh. And that's not a nice thing. It takes you months to get over it, and you will probably not be able to chase kangaroos or emus like you did before. But you're still in the community. You're not banned from the community. You're still a part, and you still have a role, and you're still there. But you walk with a limp. Makarata in this whole process for Australia is that Australia will walk with a limp if we do this right. Because Australia will have to give up some of its privilege, some of its entitlement, some of its sovereignty, some of its power, some of its wealth to put right what was put wrong. And that's why it's important that process is followed, if we understand it that way. It drags us into a relationship that is collaborative and means that we will generally work for the outcome despite it being pretty painful on the way through. Okay? That's the process. There's much more I can talk about, but I've had the little white sign put up. Time! He stood up.
Yeah. But, Glenn, it is not because we are not loving every word you are saying. I'm feeling immensely grateful for what we're doing here. But we are going to transition to unpack that, ground it, get the bounce off, the implications. What does this mean? How can we? All the questions that are percolating for us. That's what we're moving to. So Jonathan's going to moderate. He's going to grab this mic. I might give Glenn this microphone here so Glenn can speak from that. And it's going to be our questions. Why don't we just stand up, do a little bit of a stretchy stretch whilst Jonathan makes his way here. We've put on the oven in here at about 65 degrees, so it's a little toasty. We want to make sure we can, let the blood flow, stay as connected to this conversation and process as we can. But I, for one, am just eating up every word of Glenn. So I'm here with you, but I want to stay with you. So are we ready for Q&A? Q&A. So grab a seat and begin. Begin the process of asking yourself, what do you need to know? What do you not know? What question, whilst we're sitting at Glenn's feet, and I love that we're sitting and he's standing, what do we need to hear? What's going to help you move forward from this day a little bit different, a little bit changed? Cool.
I'm over here.
You're over here. Well, this is the pass around one. That's the stay where it is one.
Oh, you can take that. I'm going to go here. No.
He's a wanderer. How tall are you? How tall are you?
Hang on.
Now, let's see. Have a check. How's that?
I don't play basketball. That's better. Thank
There
you.
we go.
Thank you. Rightio.
Okay, well, thanks everyone. I've had a bit of a chat with Glenn, and Glenn's open to answer anything. I think there's that TV show, the questions that you're not allowed to ask. This is the place that you can ask them. I understand that the only thing Glenn won't address, because he's not a Wurundjeri man, be hard for him to address anything that is Wurundjeri based. So he can't do that. But he's really happy to take any question on any topic, like, should I throw one out? So what's it like being a white abo? So like, I'm just being a bit provocative there, but that's not for
provocative. Do I have to answer that?
No, that was just an example. But no, really, Glenn's open to anything. So if you've got something inside of you that you really want to get out, Glenn's open to it. And I'll just try and manage the time a little bit, and I think...
How long have we got to go for?
I've got about 4.5 hours. About...
I got up to do a talk the other day at a conference, and I said, now, if you listen carefully for the next 93 minutes... Oh, no, I meant 39 minutes. Actually, what we talk about context, in other places, another time, if Jonathan had said what he said a minute ago, I probably would have reacted badly. But in the context of trying to help us unpack the kind of things that we can and cannot say and how we need to be careful, it's appropriate in this context. But normally, I'd have become slightly agitated. But, in this context, when we're thinking about how many people may have said something like that in their lives? Don't put your hand up, just sit there and feel uncomfortable. You did put your hand up, Shakti. Yeah, I think we all have at some point, and that we need to be careful of judgment. Can I go with some of these?
Yes, of course.
I'm getting old. How do you deal with rejection and prejudice? Badly. I do deal with it badly. It affects me for some time. I grew up in a house where there was quite a bit of domestic violence. I grew up suffering bullying. I had suffered sexual abuse as a small child. I suffer from PTSD with a capital C in front of it, which that means everything's PSD. I was held hostage in a house for 5 hours with a gun in my mouth. I don't cope with anything very well most of the time, except if I have lots of coffee. Yes, please. No, I don't. So I don't always cope with it very well. I try not to show it at the time with people. I try, if I can, have the opportunity to say, do you know why you said that, and do you know that how it affects me? But that's not always easy to do, because usually the response you get when you say that is, but I was only joking, mate. Can't you take a joke? Like I was talking like this one day at an event, and a woman come after I finished, and she said to me, I don't know what we're going to do about the Aboriginal problem. And I thought, oh my God, I think I explained to you it's not an Aboriginal problem. But anyway, I didn't say anything. And then she said, because You can't give them money because they'll only spend it on alcohol. She's talking to me, an Aboriginal guy. And I said, I live in Glen Iris, 5 bottle shops and 2 blackfellas. I don't think it's just us that drinks alcohol. And it went straight through to the keeper. So some people don't get it anyway. Which is your greatest strength? I don't know. I think my greatest strength is the ability to put a space between me and what hurts me at that moment, either through humour or I'm reasonably articulate through language. And then the other greatest strength for me is my wife, who keeps me well grounded and supported, and my art. I can have the worst possible day and spend 2 hours in the studio and I can feel fantastic. Because my art isn't about drawing pictures, pretty pictures, it's about conversing with my country and the ancestors who their faces pop up in the art all the time going, yeah, that's great, keep it going. And that lifts me in that conversation. Art is the thing that has genuinely saved my life. I would not be anywhere near as sane as I am now, not that I'm very close, if I hadn't had art. How do you express your greatest gift? Paint it on a piece of canvas and sell it for a lot of money. I don't sell my art cheaply. I'm giving you a hint. I sold some art cheaply once and they came back and said, we loved your art, but we thought you had it hung wrong, so we turned it around and hung it upside down and it looks better. I went home to my wife and said, if they want my art, they're going to pay every penny it's worth. There are many in Australia who have only recently arrived, and I say the last 80 years, not of British heritage. We hear a lot about the atrocities that occurred to the first people. How do we fit in and how can we walk together? If you came here in the last 80 years, the chances are you've come from a place that has suffered some form of colonialism in its own right in one ways, and some kind of sets of atrocities in its own ways. You have to live out of those atrocities and those experiences and use them to inform your voice in this place. You are still living on the colonial privilege because you're able to come in at that level. You don't come in as a destitute Aboriginal person on as part of our community. You come in as part of the colonial, economic, philosophical place. So you still have to work through what you've been through in this context and use that to inform your voice. Many of the people I talk to, Jewish people and others, people from Vietnam, people from Iran, fully understand our story. I don't have to spend hours educating them. They go, yeah, I get it. Yeah, I get it. And they're able to talk about it with real wisdom. And I want those people to work as allies from behind the scenes, educating, talking about, living out of what they've had to live through and what their families had to live through, what their relatives have had to live through, and use it as a tool, a powerful tool, to help change the mindsets in here. How do you see the reaching out to each other happening as we learn to walk together? It's a good one. And I'd be rude if I said to you, I don't want to walk with you. But do I have to? This is an idea, walking together, that needs to be unpacked to fully understand its implications for Indigenous people. Okay, I know what you're trying to say. You want to come alongside and walk with us and support us. But you've got to do it so that you have our full and informed consent to be in that place. Does that make sense? Often we are coerced, co-opted into these kind of processes simply because it would be impolite to say no. Okay, I don't know how many times I get when I say no to somebody, but you're ungrateful. We're offering you an opportunity. You know? And refugees will tell you that when you come into a country, you'll be forever have to be the grateful person. Aboriginal people who get offered opportunities to do things, including walk together, and this is, don't take me wrong, Shakti, you know, when we're asked to walk together with somebody, how much actual power do we have to say no? When I get up in front of a group of non-Indigenous people, I switch on my fragility meter. How fragile is this mob in front of me, and how much of the truth can they take? Before they put me in a mission enclosure and take away my family. That still sticks in our head and in our body, because that was the experiences that went on. Stolen generation. The ongoing stealing of the kids process. How do we deal with those things? They are huge, but we have to find a way. I was up at Broome a few weeks ago with a bunch of scientists from ANU in Canberra and one from Canada, and we were doing a Zoom with a group of elders from Central Australia, and we'd all gone around and introduced ourselves, and the elders had gone around and introduced themselves, and then two elders arrived late. And the moment we said to them, somebody said, I didn't, somebody said, introduce yourselves, it was obvious they didn't want to. Why? Because they didn't know who we were. They didn't know why we were there. They didn't know what we were going to do with what they gave us. So they didn't want to introduce themselves. And sometimes we ask our people to do something that may seem really simple, really positive, really good, but it's hugely costly for them. And it may not be what they want to do. But saying no is even harder. Okay? Did that answer that question? That's all the ones on paper here.
Perfect. So thanks very much, Glenn. My sense is that you've left us at a really vulnerable and deep space. I definitely appreciate that. And I hope that you can maybe take a moment now and have a look inside and go as deep as you feel safe to go. And if anybody's got a question, we'll just walk over and give you the mic. So when anyone would like to ask something, just...
You do for that.
Oh, okay. Glenn, I'd just like to know, how did your mother and father meet?
How did my mother and father meet?
Yeah.
Well,
talk a little bit about...
My mother's twin brothers married my father's twin sisters. Okay, my mother... Look, you know, and it was a space in which back in the 40s there was not a huge population in the area, and they all knew each other because they all played cricket together, you know, in those spaces, and the social activities were all at the same place. So, you know, my mum was one of twins, but her twin didn't survive. But her twin brothers, who was several years younger than her, married my father's twin sisters, who were several years younger than him. And it just went from there. That's how it happened. And it's an interesting, there's a lot in that story, because my mother's family were large landowners, and now have a lot more land. So it was a sort of, and if you've got a small house and you've got two boys living in a small house and you want them to get married, it's not a better opportunity to have twin sisters marrying twin brothers in the same house. Occasionally they cuddle the wrong one. There's lots of stories about that happening in the family, you know. But that was the connection.
Thanks.
Glenn, thank you so much for what you gave to us today. That was very thought-provoking, and certainly we can never be the same people as we walk out that door. I just want to ask you a question about we individually unpack our own stories and why have we come to this place of entitlement. Okay, let's say we do that, each one of us. What next? Like, I mean, I hear that, and, you know, I think that's quite a powerful statement to make. But I guess I'm struggling with thinking, well, we do that, but what would you suggest? You know, this is one of those things where we don't have the answer and we want to know the answer.
Can you imagine that if everybody in this room was able to thoughtfully, mindfully, and ruthlessly do that to themselves, how different they would be in how they act, think, and walk on country, and how different they relate to Aboriginal people, and how different that would mean the Aboriginal people were able to relate back. I think we get caught up in this fact that we have to do something. We have to fix it. We have to take an action. And what I say in that little book is, action will come, but it will come as the evidence of a changed person, a changed mindset, a changed way of seeing it. You see it differently. And if we get everybody to help shift themselves to see differently, if you're always looking west, you'll never see the sun come up. Okay? And at the moment, we're all looking west. We're all looking to solve it on a linear process. Okay? We're all looking to get something fixed. What we have to do is turn around and look at the sun and get changed by the things that reveals in us. And that's the process that I'm wanting you to go on. I would think that if you do this, as I said, honestly, truthfully, ruthlessly to yourself, you'll be a very different person. You'll think about where you buy things from. You'll think about who you talk to. You'll think about the language you use. You'll think about how you think about it. And that will change the process. I'm working with scientific researchers involved in the water scene in Melbourne, in ANU, and over the last 12 months, what we've been doing, working through just this process. Same stuff as I've given you today. Only it takes longer to give it to academics. I hope they're not listening. But what I'm wanting them to do is shift the way they think. The way they think about the people who are in this land, the way they think about this land. Do we have to bring a Western, linear, mechanistic viewpoint that works on numbers and on evidence that we can prove? Is there another set of knowledges that will allow us to investigate water more holistically, more truthfully, and with greater respect? Now, there is no tick sheet of things you have to do. You have to do the work in yourself to shift your brain so you can do that. You have to recognise that. I often say to Christians, and I won't take the Bible there. Can I take the Bible there? Thank you. I often say to Christians for whom this is very important, before you do anything, you must take that and you must lay it on the ground. And there must be a conversation between the wisdom in country and the wisdom in the text. And if you can do that truthfully and honestly, you will have a Jesus of faith that reflects where you are, that speaks deeply to who you are. But while ever you separate this from the space that it's in and treat it, and this is the same, if we take the council set of rules and we just read it here, but if we put the council set of rules down and let it talk to the ground, we'll find new ways of interpreting those rules. It's the same process, and we need to do that in this way, and I think it's really important. Did I answer the question? Oh, good.
Can I just remind people, please, we have people on Zoom, and so although you may think you've got a loud voice, if you don't speak into the mic, the people on Zoom can't actually hear. Thank you.
You've just had some very deep questions. Now mine's coming. If I wear earrings that have got the Aboriginal colours, and if I wear T-shirts that have got Aboriginal, is that okay? And I'm not Aboriginal.
Why are you wearing them? Why are you wearing them?
But to support the Aboriginal people.
So what's your intent?
Oh, to support the Aboriginal
Absolutely.
people.
So what's wrong with that?
Oh well, okay. Yeah, is that okay?
If you're using it to, in some ways, appropriate it for your own purposes, then obviously might be a question asked. But if you're wearing it, and if somebody comes up to you and says, "Why are you wearing our flag?" Because I believe in it, I want to support it, and I believe in you. Okay?
Thank you.
And I want to support you.
Thanks very much.
Okay? Yes, over the back.
I'm formulating this question in my mind as I speak, so that's never very good. But I think the vast majority of Australians, particularly going back 2 or 3 generations, are cross-cultural and cross-national people. And you have cross-cultural and cross-cultural backgrounds. Why did you choose to take the hard path and speak of your Aboriginal heritage?
Yeah, that's a question that pops up occasionally. The quick answer to that is, I don't think I actually chose to. I think it actually chose me. And I think I talk about Aboriginality being a bit like a slow-release fertiliser. It just slowly kicks away. And in our pedagogy, as I was saying to somebody this morning, our pedagogy is when you're ready. When you're ready. I started on this journey in full when in around 2012, I was asked to talk about exile to the National Aboriginal Torres Strait Islanders Anglican Commission. And I went down and to the place where it was at, and I got up to talk. I got about 7 or 8 minutes in it, and then had to rush to the toilet. And I stuck my head down the toilet and brought up every toenail I had in my foot. It was just awful. Oh, you could feel them coming up through the veins. It was just awesome. I just was so ill for about 10 minutes. I never moved. My head was right down there, and I was gone. And when I came back in, I walked past one of the elders from the Tiwi Islands, and she just gently put her hand on my arm and said, "That's all the bad stuff going. You are now free." And another lady next to me leant over and said, "Now you'll do good things for our people." I don't think you get a choice. Okay? I was an Anglican priest and a Salvation Army officer. How much more white would you want to be? 45 years I lived in the white bit and still didn't become Prime Minister or a bishop. Oh yeah, mate, look, I've been now I was a Salvo, which is evangelical, and now Middle High Church Anglican, progressive, and I'm an Aboriginal. Does that answer your question? Okay. It's a question I get asked a lot, okay? And sometimes by people who want to catch you out. Not you didn't want to, but I mean other people in this setting here, that's fine to ask this question, but there are other people who ask that to sort of, yeah, well, really, mate, don't have the... Thank you. That's what I try and do. I stay away from cultural stuff, as I said before, because I'm still only a 14-year-old boy. I haven't been initiated into culture, so I stay away from cultural stuff as much as possible. That's for the people who have a know. Aboriginal knowledge systems work that there are elders at various stages of knowledge. There are some that have the whole bottle, others who have only bits of it. But that's to ensure, it's not shared out with everybody, but that's to ensure the authenticity and the integrity of that knowledge remains. Okay, so, you know, not everybody knows everything. But everybody will know something about most things. And there'll be some that'll know everything about the thing that they're involved in. So I don't get involved in that. But my task, I guess, is to act as an interrogator of the intersection between the two, and try and this is where my colour helps, because you don't get threatened by me making the kind of comments I make, because I look partly like you. Does that make sense? Yeah, it does. It does. Okay, any other questions? Hey!
So Gary Foley is an activist who addresses Invasion Day rally and stirs up a lot of anger. Here in Belgrade we have a Survival Day. Now, setting aside the actual date chosen, where on that scale do you sit between Survival Day and Invasion Day?
I'm not a bloody survivor. I'm not a survivor. I'm real, I'm true, I'm contemporary, I'm here. And I'm living with the dynamic nature of being fully Aboriginal in this place. I am not surviving. I might have to have at times where I have to put my back against the wall and have a bit of a Barney, but I'm not a survivor. Okay? None of our people were survivors. They took on the battle to hold on to what was theirs. And they fought to maintain themselves. I'm not a survivor. Invasion Day is probably in some senses truthful, but you know, it was Invasion Day when Cook came and sneezed and we got COVID 1770. I did a painting like that, which was a finalist in the Blake Art Prize in 2020, which has got Cook in the corner sneezing, and you've got all these COVID genomes in bright red around the place, and a white cross across Aboriginal song lines. And it's saying, and then the little white lines coming down with a yellow fence up either side saying, you'll never get rid of these things, but we know, because we know from experience, we'll never get rid of it, but you can put little fences down and keep them in there. Control them. They think they're in charge, but they're not. We are. So I'm nowhere. I guess I don't get involved with any of those things, actually. I don't mind. I'm Australia Day. I'm quite happy for people who want to wear their flag as underwear, or wear them as thongs, or wear them as hats, or wear them, you know, wrap their bodies in the flag. I'm happy if they're that silly they can go and do whatever they like on that day. Because that's disrespectful, even to their stuff. So I don't get involved in that. You can have your party. I go and do things that give me life on that day. And that might mean going and sitting with some mob. It might mean sitting by the river. It might mean sitting down with my wife and having a sophisticated glass of wine. It might. But I don't get involved in the argy-bargy of stuff that in the long term, if we change the date, we change the name of it, our kids will still be in jail. Our kids will be still taken away. Our kids will be still uneducated. Our women will still be facing domestic violence. Our men will still be facing alcohol and early death. Changing the date ain't going to change any of that. And changing the name of the day, or Australia, with a Y, doesn't really fix any of those things, in my humble opinion. Does that answer your question?
So, Glenn, I'm just quoting one of your posts here, and I really liked it, and I don't know if we got time to unpack it, but you said, as John Howard knew in the early 2000s, and as we are seeing now, a money-hungry and growth at all costs society is entirely incompatible with the sovereignty of Indigenous peoples and their ontologies. What do we do?
Don't elect him again.
Oh, that's true, yeah. But, no different with Albanese.
Well, when the Labor Party got in, people were contacting me saying, well, this is really positive, this is really good. I go, look, at the very best, I'm cautiously optimistic. But I know that politics doesn't sit well with justice, and never has. Politics and justice rarely come together. Self-interest at some level will drive the political process. So yes, I'm mindful of that whole thing. Dare I say that if we lived in a world where we could develop utopia, it's the unpacking of the economic system that we live in to allow fair go to people who live by a different economic system. It would mean limiting the use of development in and on Aboriginal land. It would mean giving back power to Mabo so that Aboriginal people could really say no without losing any of the benefits that go along with it. It would mean giving Aboriginal people the right to say, you're not fracking here, you're not, one company says they've given 50,000 jobs to people in mining. Do you understand the irony of giving Aboriginal people jobs to dig up their sacred text? That would be like giving Matt the job to put the Bible through a shredder. Okay? And that's the idea. So we have to think about how do we change the economic system. And I was talking to some people the other night, and there was one particular person who kept coming back, but there has to be a pathway to productive living. I was in Broome, and this young man came in. He was in his early 20s, and he'd been brought up on the river by the elders. He'd been educated, but much educated in a Western way, as well as, but he primarily had been educated in his culture and his practice. And when that 20-year-old stood there, you could feel yourself standing next to 65,000 years of deep knowledge. When he spoke, everybody in that room, and they were all professors and high-power people, they listened just because of who he is. What can we do? Give our people the right to raise strong, well-educated, in an Aboriginal sense, as well as in a non-Aboriginal sense, but well-educated, well-raised, well-connected Aboriginal people who are strong and powerful in who they are, who have the capacity to stand on country and go, no, no, and here is the reasons why, and be able to take long-term, costly decisions without the need to take pragmatic decisions to get government funding. That's what we've got to do. We've got to shift the system from being, you know, if people who aren't Aboriginal want to live by the economic system we have, go for it. But our people should have the choice, and we should educate them to have the capacity to make that real. And let me tell you, you want to stop climate change, you want to stop flooding, you want to stop loss of biodiversity, empower our people to be who they are, and we'll stop it, because we will know the full impact of everything you're doing, and we'll engage in helping you to see it differently. That young man who's fighting for his river, which is the last pristine river in Australia, which is going to have agriculture funded by the local government, including things like cotton, etc., rice, and they're going to dam it, and they're going to floodplain harvest it. He's fighting for that. Okay? And we have to fight for that too, because that's awful. And we have to give our young people not a Western mindset, an Aboriginal mindset that is interrogated Western knowledge. Okay? Don't bring them down here and put them into Melbourne Grammar or Halberry or any of those places. Take the knowledge to them, talk to them after they become fully engaged with what gives them life. Their mum, country, kin. That's what needs to happen. And we get more of those fellows and girls, we get more of them, we will be much more able to direct our own processes and be in charge. But while we have divide and rule, give this mob some money, but you don't get any money because you weren't a part of this because you didn't say yes. Okay, we'll say yes, we'll give you some money, but we'll give them more before they came first. All this kind of stuff. Our people shouldn't be having to fight for the crumbs under the table. We gave you, when you came here, you got a land that was well looked after, and you've stuffed it. Why are we having to take the crumbs under the table? Help our people to be powerful. That'll change the system.
Just before I give you the mic, we'll make this the last question, because we're going to have Barbara, your group, do a song afterwards, but also maybe just to give yourself a chance at the end, Glenn, after the last question, to say anything you want to say or complete in any way that you'd like to feel complete.
I'm not sure what my question is now, but as you were speaking then, I was thinking, what if I don't want to be the Western way? What if I want to be that way? Where do I fit? How can I have an Aboriginal mindset, if you put it that way, like a Western versus an Aboriginal? I like that way better. I want that way. What do I do?
Yeah, well, look, there's no washing machines at our place. No dishwashers.
Oh, damn.
Damn. No, look, I think that it's a respectful engagement with the local elders, listening, and when you can't listen anymore, listen. If you can find someone that can help you to learn some language as a way into understanding how we think, there are any number here with the Koori Heritage Trust and others who provide education processes to go along and to gather knowledge and information. But being Aboriginal needs to be lived in community. So once it's a kind of, you've got to get the knowledge that sits as a foundation, so when you're listening to Aboriginal people, you go, yeah, I know what they're saying, I know why they're saying, I know where it's coming from. But you can respectfully be involved, not as someone that comes in. The word ally always worries me. We looked what happened after the First World War. We were fighting our allies in the Second World War. What's the motivation for being an ally, all the rest of it? I don't like that word. But if you're prepared to be a learner, a student, an unpowerful person, an unrecognised person, because you may sit with a group of elders for a long time before they even introduce you into the conversation. And you go, I've been doing this for weeks. Nothing's happened. Yes, a lot's happened. They've assessed where you're at. You've learnt the power of sitting in space and sitting at the back without exerting. I was out at Wilkenya April last year, and the river had just started to run, but back in 2019 and onwards till then, 2021, there'd been no water in the river. And they were having a little ceremony to thank all the sponsors and everybody that has supported them, because the government didn't actually give them any water over that period of time. It came from charities. And the Governor of New South Wales was doing there was a state election coming up, so she was moving around Western New South Wales, and she was there as the guest of honour. But they never, in the whole time that ceremony went on, asked her to speak. And everybody says, oh, that's a bit rude. You're the Governor of New South Wales and you don't ask her to speak. And we'd gone out to dinner that night, because there's only one place in Wilkenya to go to dinner, and that's the golf club. And we were both at the same place. And walking out the door, I bumped into her and I said, oh, Governor, I'd just like to thank you for your humility today and for what you did in that place. And she looked at me, I said, you allowed them to get on with their ceremony and make their point in their own way without demanding your right to speak. And she says, oh, I wouldn't do that. I said, I know you perhaps you wouldn't, but many in your position would. And this is an important thing for them, that you had the humility not to get up and defend your government, not to get up and say we'll do better next time, just to let it be and allow them to do their thing. That's a very important and powerful message that she sent to the people in that town, that she was there to listen and not to make excuses. And it was a really powerful moment, and I thanked her deeply as an Aboriginal person for having the capacity to step back. And that's what you need to do. Not rush in and go, oh, I can do that. No, just let it go. If they want you to do that, at the right time they'll ask you to do that. But they might not want you to do that. They may not even want that done. So just stay in the space. Okay? I guess that brings this to an end, and I think this has been a wonderful walking together, even though perhaps I didn't want to do that. This has been a wonderful conversation, and as I said to a group of people that I met with the other night, this is where reconciliation is actually a contact sport. It's me and you and you, me and you. It's how we talk together, and we talk and we learn. And I thank you for your really solid questions, your deep interest, and I hope that something that I've said this afternoon has been of value, that you will go away, circulate this through your AFL box. Do you know what an AFL box is? You've got to get one. You've got to get one. It's a little box up here, and it has the words on it, awaiting further light. So I hope that some of the things I've talked about have worked today. Some of them might have slipped into the AFL box, and that will get, you'll talk to Stacey or somebody later, and then you'll go, yeah, now I understand. But I thank you for the invitation, Shakti, thank you for the invitation. I really appreciate it, and I thank you for your support. Thank you, Matt, for having me here, and thank you, everybody. I've had a great day. Thanks, John.
Thanks. On behalf of the Hills Walking Together group, thank you so much. It's been a real privilege to have you here. And of course, for all the hard work, I don't even know, where is Shakti here? For all the hard work you've done and stress you've gone under. So well done. Yeah, sure. And I think the next part, Barb, we're going to hand over to you. Thanks.
Pretty much. Oh, for me to talk now. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, the lyrics are going to be up on the screen, so you'll see who wrote it. And this arrangement's by Jane Thompson, James Rigby, and it's a favourite of our choir.
Beautiful, and a beautiful fitting way to end what this conversation has unearthed for us. Glenn, you were talking about the young elder that you were standing next to and felt the depth in him that connected him with your ancestors of 65,000 years, and I had a similar sense today. There's so much that I will take from this, and I love, Jeanette, your comment of we won't walk out that room, we can't walk out that room the same person. That you've offered us a gift that we now need to take away and do something with. And I love the encouragement. I love the walking with a limp that hopefully we all take. It's got to cost something. We've got to do some work. We've got to look in. We've got to ask questions. We've got to do something about it. We have to walk with a limp. Rather than just this as a gathering of advocacy, of cheering you on, going all the best, what can we do to help? Actually calling us to walk with a limp as an implication of what you've offered us is really significant. So thank you. There's so much I'll take out of today as a result of you being here. So thank you again for offering your time. You're an exceptionally busy man at these times, which we love, but comes at a cost to you as a person. So it's great that we're wanting to hear from you more, but for the small amount of mob left, it means there's a significant cost. So we're really indebted to you to offering so much of yourself today. I also want to thank a few others, and that is, there's a few others we weren't able to thank, Steve and Stacey, but please be aware of both of those. The Outer Ranges Council, Joe, thank you for coming, and also for the work that you do and will continue to do. But it was great to have your presence here today. The Hills Walking Together crew of the Hills is Shakti heads that up, and that was kind of birthed out of this space, but there's a heap of people that have jumped on board that, and as it's getting a life of its own and beginning to connect more and more with local elders and leaders, it's wonderful. Shakti, thank you so much for the mountains of work you've poured in to getting to today, to starting to put on some events and giving voice to our First Nations people. Thank you for the whole clan. Quick show of hands, where is the tribe? There's a few of them gathered around, spotted around. Kelly, was Jen somewhere there? So thank you. A mountain of work to organise an event such as this. So thank you, crew. And all the volunteers too that have gathered with those crew and made an event like this happen, both presently and behind the scenes. There's a heap of you. So thanking you. Shakti. Yes, a book like this. So in the foyer, grab one as you go past. Cool, a sign-up sheet for Hills Walking Together just at the door. Glenn, are you hanging around? Do you have any of your bits and pieces? Were you going to flog some of your merch? No? The Hearth Gallery. Excellent. Okay. You have probably gauged that very well, and a good little nudge for us to do some extra work, find another way to explore your work and to do something to model. Cool. Wow, so much happening. Excellent, a great invitation. Thank you. Thank you for being here, for your questions that fed into the space, that reflected the unasked questions. So your participation here was really important, and your willingness to be here shows you're wanting to go on a journey. So may that journey continue. So big round of applause for Glenn, for having this event, for being here, and for the journey that awaits us as we go. Big round of applause. And thank you for the choir too, they're behind me, yes. Very good. Cool. Onwards. Oh, whatever.